Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last Forestry Speed Dating webinar focused on unlocking forest carbon markets with innovative solutions. I'm Siebe Briers. I'm an expert at the European Forest Institute's Bioregions Facility, and I'm happy to moderate today's session. The Forestry Speed Dating series is a dynamic platform that promotes innovative solutions, fostering innovation and catalyzing collaboration in the forest bioeconomy. You can view all past sessions, download the fact sheets for all 15 carbon solutions presented by both the public and the private sector, along with the slides of the presenters. These resources are available on our website, and a link will also be provided in the chat. In today's session, let's deep dive into two more forest carbon initiatives from the public sector, namely from Italy and France. This session will feature a LIFE project from Italy, highlighting its efforts in sustainable forest management, and it will then be followed by a presentation of France's low carbon labeling system, also called Label Bas Carbone, which aims to reduce and remove emissions. This forest rating wouldn't be possible without the great support of our member regions, the Basque Country, Catalonia, and North Rhine-Westphalia on our website. We also want to thank our partners of this Forestry Speed Dating series, namely the European State Forest Association, the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, the Irish Bioeconomy Foundation, Bioeconomy Ventures, and Ubuntu.
All right. So thank you again for inviting us. And today we will present you the LIFE CO2PES&PEF project, to which we have been coordinators for the time span of 2029 to 2023. So first off, I will present my university. We are a public university based in Pisa, Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, and specifically we work in the Institute of Management. The Institute of Management is comprised by 3 research areas, and I work in the Sustainability Management Laboratory area. We work on applied science and apply this science for the management in public and in the public and in private sector. The areas that we that compose our research group is circular economy, energy and resource efficiency, life cycle thinking, corporate social responsibility, environmental management, and climate change and decarbonization. Here I left the website on the slide. Particularly this project, we have been coordinators, and these have been all the partners that were part of the project. We had 2 regions and a category association for wood, and also another university, the University of Milan. So the general objective of the project CO2PES&PEF was to establish and promote the application of sustainable forest management in Italy, because we have a great problem in managing our forest, to both increase the CO2 storage and also avoid fire and wind throw risk in our forest, to which we are very much affected. But also it was to improve and make more competitive our wood supply chain. Of course, we know that forests are very important for us and are a major sustenance input for mountain regions and rural regions. So it is very important for us to reconcile forest conservation with the need to harvest all the wood that is needed for making the wood supply chain more competitive. The 3 specific objectives were the evaluation and monitoring of the forest ecosystem services, the improvement of the wood productive system, and creating a system for ecosystem credits to be sold and purchased on a voluntary market. We will consider this aspect today, so I will focus on this aspect in today's presentation. The pilot areas that were included in the project were here, the Fusine forest in Friuli Venezia Giulia, and then in Emilia Romagna, the Mani Forestale Porrivese and Consorzio Comunale Parmensi. So 3 publicly managed forests. So the first thing that we did in our project was to evaluate the carbon sink capacity and the ecosystem services provided by these 3 forests, by these 3 pilot forests. And we assessed the fire and wind throw risks of these forests, and also the analysis of the hydrogeological instability of these areas. And we came out with 3 mitigation actions for the forest to improve their health and their capability to provide their ecosystem services to the mountain areas, the rural areas, but also to the general public. So to do so, we in collaboration with PEFC Italia, which is the standard organization for wood producing forests, we provided and produced a standard that would create additionality for our forests. What does it mean? It means that forests are capable to apply and to be certified with a methodology to quantify the ecosystem credits, the ecosystem services generated by the forests themselves. And they are generated by applying a sustainable forest management concept. So first off, the forests must be PEFC certified. So they have to either have a certification of sustainable forest management or a certification of sustainable management of arboreal plantations. And then they can be certified for a further certification standard. That is this one that we provided in our project. So it's very important to understand that this is to go above what it's already a regulatory need by law. This is, in fact, an additional activities after the basic sustainable forest management certification. The purpose of the standard is to increase the carbon that is stored by forests by either storage, absorption, or non-emission. The second goal is the protection of biodiversity, including flora and fauna. The third is tourism and recreation functions, because for us in Italy, but I guess everywhere, forests are a very important source of tourism and a very interesting place to go for vacations and for holidays, especially nowadays that in summers are getting hotter and hotter in Italy. And also in general, another purpose was to generate forest welfare suitability. The principles are very important because the first principle is to not having an environmental impact on other surrounding areas, the duration and the permanence over time. So the projects that are found to be interesting to get this certification need to have a specific duration and permanence to have their expected impact. Transparency is very important, so all documents have to be compliant with the certification, and the certification following this standard has to be given by a third-party organization. The basic requirements come from the principles, and the project with which the forest managers or owners want to get the certification must be credible, so must be feasible over time, must be transparent with all the activities planned out correctly, must ensure a duration and permanence over time that can allow the impact to have place also in the following years. So it's not possible to have a project that after its finish or termination leaves a situation that gets back to the beginning. And as I was saying earlier, there must be no leakage. So the project must not provide an external impact to an external area out of the forest that needs to be certified. And specifically, it needs to get additionality. Now, let's break this into more specific. So as you can see from this graph, this is the business as usual model, okay, until here. And this is called the baseline because the business as usual is the situation as if nothing, as if the further sustainable forest management is brought about. Then when the project starts, the good practice implementation starts, and you can see that the baseline falls. Okay, so from the business as usual continuation, it goes down. And this is the project emissions. So it should be the project emission, of course, should be lower than the baseline. The additional management or actions with the respect, the additional management must be lower than the existing law requirements. So it needs to do something more that is already required by law. And the subtraction between the baseline, the business as usual, and the project emissions is what we consider a carbon credit or an ecosystem credit. For instance, in our case, we use the standard to create additionality for carbon storage. The credit is of course 1 ton of CO2 that is not emitted or that is stored into forests, and this ecosystem credit then can be put in a voluntary market, and it can be sold and purchased by other organizations to lower their sustainability, their emissions, their general emissions. So in particular for carbon, we focused on 3 forest management solutions, which is the storage, uptake, and non-emission, as I said earlier. So the first was to increase carbon stock in increased biomass. So the focus was to increase the biomass of trees, of forests in general, to increase the carbon stored. The first was the conversion from a coppice forest into high tree forest, which can allow a higher storage of carbon. The second is the shift exemption. So giving up the possibility to cut trees and harvest them for wood production, and allow them to grow without cutting them, of course, selected species. And then the third possibility is the afforestation or reforestation, especially after destructive events, to which we are much affected in Italy. The second possibility is to increase carbon stock for non-emissions, meaning that we avoid that forests get into bad health and they lose their capability of providing this specific ecosystem service. So the first is the protection from biotic damage. For instance, if a tree is caught with pests or with pathogens, they can be cut down to avoid the spread of the pest and avoid the possibility to destroy a complete forest. And the second is, of course, creating lines and activities for protecting the forest from fire events. In our project, in the three pilot areas, we applied this certification, and these are the number of credits of carbon credits that were generated. So you can see that this was a great possibility for public forests, which usually don't have the means for managing themselves and applying these specific certifications to have a management that would allow them to also auto-finance them in the future. Because what we did with these credits, we uploaded them on this registry, which is a public-based registry managed by the University of Genoa, that is called Eco2Care. And we included all our generated credits onto this registry in a voluntary market for the possibility of other organizations, private or public, to purchase them and decrease their emissions. So some policy results that we gain with our project is that the two regions part of the project provided two regional resolutions that would allow a better improvement of sustainable forest management, also supporting the possibility to apply our certification and giving also specific instructions, because we found that instructions and knowledge are the main problems with our forests. So when the public organizations and public authorities give help to the forest, it's much easier for them to access all the resources. And also another important policy results that we gained is that our project, CO2PES&PEF, was included in a Commission staff working document of the European Commission on the guidance on development, public and private payment schemes for forest ecosystem services. This was very important for us because it can be an example also in other contexts. So thank you for the attention, and I left here my contacts. If you would like to ask any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Our second speaker is Simon Martel. He's a research fellow at the Institute for Climate Economics in France. So Simon, thank you for joining us. You can share your screen and the floor is yours.
So I'm very pleased to be here to present you the label Carbone, and I would like to thank EFE to invite me to present the label Carbone. Before to present the label Carbone, a few words about I4CE, the French Institute for Climate Economics. We are a small team of 40 researchers working on climate mitigation and adaptation and bringing knowledge to the policymaker in France and also in Europe. Let just me take my notes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to present you the label Carbone, which is a French domestic standard for carbon certification. But before to present it, I would like to show you the emergence of the label Carbone and how we built this label Carbone. Actually, it was a bottom-up approach that was enhanced by two clubs, which are networks that I4C is facilitating. These networks, they gather stakeholders interested in climate, wood and forests, and also and the other one about climate and agriculture issues. In these networks, you can find stakeholders such as forest owners, managers, but also companies and public authorities. In 2015, some needs were identified that there was a demand from French company to support local projects. They were already buying credits internationally, but they wanted to also buy French credits from French projects. In the other hand, in France, there was a collapse of public funding for forest management. There was almost nothing to fund the forest management, but there were a growing need of resource to adapt the forest to climate change. So with these two statements, we start to look at existing international standards, but we assessed that they were not suitable for France because of two issues. There was an issue about double counting that has been solved now, but at that time it was an issue, but also issues about transaction costs. To try to say it simply, it was not suitable for our forest owners that own between 4 and 50 hectares to go in that kind of certification because the costs were too high, and the international standards like Vera or Gold Standard were more adapted to hundreds of hectares. And from the state point of view, there was a need to create tools to meet climate targets at the international level. So in 2015, a project was set up bringing together I4C with its knowledge of carbon certification and also knowledge about business demand for credits, and stakeholder as the CNPF with its knowledge about technical forest management. After several years of projects, we managed to build the label Carbone. So the label Carbone is a carbon offsetting or contribution standard. It is now run by the French Ministry of Environment. Us as I4C, we are just supporting some development of the label Carbone, but we are not really involved anymore to run the system. There is a national frame that sets all the general rules for the label Carbone. And then at the core of the system, there are the methodologies. Today, there are 15 methodologies approved in diverse sectors. It comes from transportation, buildings, agriculture, and forestry. And that's methodologies. They are not developed by the state. They are developed by any stakeholders that want to propose a methodology. And then there is a process to approve the methodology with public consultation and also experts that review the methodology before the approval by the states. And then any stakeholder can apply for projects that refer to a specific methodology. And after some years, any project can deliver carbon credits after, of course, a verification process by independent auditors. I think the frame is quite common and similar to other standards. Some features that are important here is that the label Carbone only certify a project and not the company that will buy the credits or finance it. And also something particular and different from the international standard, that the credits are not transferable. There is no secondary market. So a company buying the credits from a label Carbone project can't sell it anymore. Then the fundamental quality criteria, they are mainly the same than as Roberta presented before. They are really common with voluntary carbon market. So I will not go in detail to present this quality criteria. But it's really the same principle that Roberta presented before. you have to set a baseline, and then you just account for the credits that are in your project, and you subtract the baseline scenario. We could go deeper in detail with quality criteria maybe later. What about forestry in the label by carbon? There are currently 3 forest methodology that have been developed by the CNPF, and it's quite interesting that we find more or less the same practices than in Italy and that Roberta presented. The first one is afforestation methodology, where you can plant trees either in agricultural land or in abandoned lands. Then there is a methodology for reforestation of impacted forests. There is a strong eligibility criteria where you can only replant after a strong event that could be storm, forest fire, or intensive diebacks. And the third methodology is a conversion of copies to high stand methodology, and of course it applies only for deciduous trees. And a good example is a conversion of a chestnut coppice, which has in some areas in France, it could have a rotation time of 20 years. And you convert it to high stand management with a rotation time of 40-45 years. Here you can find some features of this forest methodology. We account, of course, for the biomass, the carbon biomass. For the afforestation methodology, the soil, the carbon in the soil is also accounted if you shift from a land that was with tillage to a forest, not if you shift from grassland to forest, of course. And we also account for the carbon in the wood products and also avoided emissions through substitution. The project duration are always 30 years, which is a compromise between the long-term in forestry, but also the need to have current time for the liability purposes. The credits, they are generated after 5 years after a field audit from an independent auditor. And we were talking before about the risk, and we deal with the risk with carbon discount. There are generic discounts that will apply anyway. So the principle of the discount is that you withdraw a part of the carbon credits. But there are also other discounts that are applied according to the level of risk, for example, of fire risk. Then it's not only about carbon. Co-benefits are also really important. There are some principles to avoid any degradation of biodiversity and so on. But we also use a co-benefit grid to assess other benefits than carbon. And the co-benefit grid has 4 items: biodiversity, socio-economic impacts, soil preservation, and water preservation. You can see here some example of the co-benefits that are in the label by carbon. Then what's the label by carbon today? I may not have said it, but the label by carbon started in 2019, so it has more or less 5 years now. In total, there are 15 methodology and almost 1,000 validated projects with a potential of emission reduction and removals of around 3 million tons of CO2. That's figures for the label by carbon, but about the forestry part, most of the projects are actually forest projects, around 800 projects, but they are quite small projects. The average size of a forest project is a 9-hectare project. And it's around half of the total carbon benefits of the label by carbon, so 1.5 million tons of CO2 that are expected to be stored in the forests. And we have around half of the projects are afforestation, another half are reforestation, and unfortunately we have very few copies to Iceland projects. That's how the general figures, and we can talk a bit about prices. Here you can see prices that are they are not directly assessed in the label by carbon. The label by carbon has no information about the prices, but an independent stakeholder is actually going to the operator and asking them how do they sell the credits and so on. And they do that for all French offsetting and contribution operators, and they are declaring that their average price to sell carbon credits is around €6 per ton of CO2. That's for all standards. But we can see that the prices, when it's label by carbon standard credits, it's really higher. It's around €30 per ton of CO2. And it encompasses quite a large range of prices. It can go up to €100 per ton of CO2 if the project has a lot of co-benefits. And on the right side, you can see the share of the value. Around 3/4 of the value of what is paid by the buyer of the credit is directly going to the project, and around one quarter is for the transaction cost. Just a few words about what's in progress now. Actually, the 3 forestry methodologies that I have presented are currently under revision. There is that will be the 3rd version of the methodology, and the major changes will be for to extend the eligibility for overseas department and territory of France. We are going to greater environmental integrity with some criteria about the mix of species, and also more stringent eligibility criteria for diebacks. There are also new rules or clarification of the rule for the verification. There are different stakeholders that are working on new methodology. There are quite a few, but we can cite a continuous cover forestry methodology that is almost at the end of the process. Then there is an enrichment planting methodology under development, and you can see other methodology under development. And the French state is also actually currently improving the registry and also the way they are presenting the data on their website. Before to finish, I just would like to enlighten some of the strengths of the label by carbon. It's really today a shared tool involving a wide range of stakeholders. It comes, there are the public and the private forest owners and managers are now almost all involved in the label by carbon, either through project development or through methodology development. Of course, the public administration is at the core of the system, but also NGOs are involved in the discussion to improve the methodologies. A really important feature is that it's a public leadership, and it affords quite reasonable transaction costs, and that's why we can have projects that are 5 hectares projects that wouldn't have been possible with international standards that are private standards. And also, it generates a lot of trust for all the stakeholders and, of course, for the buyers. The 3 methodology are tailored methodology, and they are quite they are a strong framework. They are very structural, and that implies a lot of work to develop them. But then it also means that it's less work for project developers and also less work for auditors. And then the audit costs are quite are not so high, because there are a lot of parameters that are already fixed in the methodology and not by the developer of the project. I've already said it, but it's not only carbon. There are also a lot of co-benefits, and that's important for our forestry field. We have national regulation supporting the demand for credits. In France, a law in 2021 enforced flying companies to buy carbon credits for their domestic flights, and that's really help and provoke a demand for credits. And of course, as I showed, it's a continuous improvement process to adapt the label by carbon. And we will, in the next year, we will really look forward to adapt the label by carbon to the European CRCF, the Carbon Removal Framework, which is really an important step to bring more trust in the voluntary carbon market. Just before to finish, some links where you can find information. Unfortunately, the Label by Carbon website is only in French, but the study of the carbon price that I have shown is available in English. You can have the link here in the middle, and in I4C's webpage, you can also find information in English about the Label by Carbon. Thanks a lot for your attention.